It's 11 at night on a Tuesday. Mortgage is paid through next month. Kids are asleep down the hall. You've got the job title it took you 15 years to land. And somewhere between turning off the kitchen light and getting into bed, a feeling shows up you didn't ask for and can't quite name. It isn't some big collapse. It's quieter than that. More like a low hum running underneath a life that, by every outside measure, is going exactly the way it was supposed to. You checked the boxes, got the degree, built the career, bought the house, found the person, had the kids, who are, by any account, doing fine. And somewhere along the way, nobody ever said it outright, but everyone implied it. Finishing this list was supposed to feel like something. Relief, maybe, or that sense of finally arriving somewhere and being able to stop working so hard to get there. It doesn't feel like that though, so maybe the real question isn't whether you did something wrong. Maybe it's why doing everything right still feels exactly like this. You didn't invent this sequence, you inherited it. School first to keep you safe from the worst mistakes, then a steady career, climbing and deferring the things you wanted now for things you were told you'd want more later, then the marriage, the suburb, the kids, and somewhere past 40. The part nobody warns you about, maintenance. Hold on to what you built. Keep being the reliable one and wait for retirement to be the part where it pays off. Follow the steps the thinking went and the feeling you were chasing. Safety, the sense of having made it, would show up automatically once you crossed the finish line. Here's the part nobody mentioned when you signed up for any of this though. Even running the sequence exactly as designed, there's a documented dip waiting on the other side. Researchers who've tracked well-being across dozens of countries keep finding the same basic shape. Life satisfaction doesn't just climb steadily as you get older, it drops through your 30s and it tends to bottom out somewhere in your mid to late 40s across many countries and data sets. People argue about the exact age. Nobody's arguing much about the shape. Worth sitting with for a second. It changes the question you're actually asking. This isn't proof that your specific choices were the wrong ones. It's closer to evidence that this particular decade is structurally rough for almost everyone walking through it, regardless of how carefully they followed the instructions. The dip isn't a verdict on your life, so much as a forecast nobody bothered printing on the box. So if the timing isn't really personal, something else has to be behind the flatness itself. Why didn't getting the thing actually deliver the feeling the thing was supposed to deliver? Psychologists have a term for part of it, the arrival fallacy, the belief that hitting a destination, the partner, the house, the title, permanently shifts how you feel. It doesn't though. Your emotional baseline is sturdier than that. Within weeks, the new normal just becomes normal. The house turns into something you maintain. The promotion turns into something you do. That's hedonic adaptation, and it's less a flaw in you than a nervous system built to chase the next thing. Suddenly, realizing the structure that used to point you toward the next thing isn't as clear anymore. That's the part that actually stings. For 25 years, the forward motion itself was the structure of your life. Get the degree, then the job, then the house, each one giving the next 5 years some shape to move toward. Then you check the last box, and the engine that's been running this whole time just keeps running toward nothing in particular. You've probably got browser tabs open right now you've never had the nerve to close. A course, a move, a different version of the job, each one a door you can't quite open and can't quite shut either. The disorientation isn't because the goal failed you. It's because the goal was never built to do the job of the part of you that does the wanting. Which raises a tougher question. If the goal itself didn't betray you, what did? You'd have to go back further to who decided what you were supposed to want in the first place. If you were the reliable kid growing up, didn't cause problems, got decent grades, could always be counted on, you were often praised for a specific trait, not needing much. That praise felt good at the time. It also meant the years most people spend figuring out who they actually are got skipped over quietly, swapped out for a faster, safer commitment to whatever role worked best for the people around you. There's a name developmental psychologists use for something like this: identity foreclosure. Committing to a path before doing the work of exploring who you are, usually because it's what kept the people whose approval mattered most happy at the time. Call it less a diagnosis and more a description. A trade you made at 15 without realizing it, with the bill finally showing up at 43. So here you are, standing in the middle of a life built almost entirely out of other people's needs, your employers, your spouses, your kids, your aging parents, and you're facing a question you've never had to answer before. What do you actually want? Separate from whatever you happen to be good at providing. On top of all that, you're hitting this exact decade at a particularly bad moment. You're old enough to have grown up on a version of the American promise built for a slower, cheaper economy, the one your parents got. But you're young enough that you had to run your adult life inside a completely different one. You came out of school into downturns that knocked your early earnings off course before they'd started and took on student debt at a scale the generation before you never had to plan around. Whatever you've built since then is mostly sitting in home equity, not a checking account, which is where the actual pressure lives. The cost of maintenance turned out to be bigger than advertised. Close to a quarter of adults are actively raising a kid and supporting an aging parent at the same time. And for people specifically in their 40s, having both a parent over 65 and a child to look after is even more common. Call it the sandwich generation. Of course, that doesn't make them less loved. It just means love doesn't make the load weightless. Either way, it functions like a second full shift stacked on top of the first. It shows up in small, specific ways once you start noticing it. Scroll through how people in their 40s talk about this online, and the midlife crisis looks nothing like the old cliche. Nobody's buying a convertible. You'll see someone posting about the 14-year-old car with a rattle they've decided to just live with, or how going out for one drink with friends has become a small math problem before saying yes, or a sourdough starter kept alive and named something ridiculous, because that's a kind of control that's still affordable. For a lot of people, there isn't much money left over for the midlife your father's generation got to have. Some weeks, there's barely enough for groceries. You're not imagining the squeeze. You inherited the rules of one economy and got handed the bill from a completely different one. So here's the actual shape of it. A well-documented low point in life satisfaction, hitting almost everyone around this age. Two things you'd spent decades treating as one: the milestone and the identity it was supposed to confirm, turning out to be separate, with only the first ever finished. All of it landing during the exact stretch your generation got squeezed hardest economically, none of which makes the marriage, the house, or the career a mistake. Those things are real protection against isolation and instability. The problem was never the milestones. It's that you reached everyone without ever being asked what you actually wanted underneath them. And here's the part that should change how the rest of this lands. The curve recovers. The same researchers who mapped the dip also mapped the climb back out, starting around your 50s. The external pressures don't really vanish. What changes is how selective you get about where your energy goes. The bottom isn't permanent. It's a decade, not a life sentence. So the wrongness you've been carrying around was never a verdict on the life you built. It was the sound of a question that got skipped 25 years ago, finally getting loud enough that you can't ignore it anymore. You didn't fail the sequence. The sequence just never bothered asking you a question it really should have. And noticing that, instead of pushing it back down with one more task, isn't the crisis everyone keeps warning you about. It might be the first real choice in this entire story that's been yours.